Hello, everyone. How are you? I'm Monica Carless, coming to you from Vancouver Island, Canada. And this is Conversations with the Universe. And today I'm super excited to talk with my friend and creatrix, Sarah Norrad. Hello, Sarah.
Hello, thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to speak to you, not only because you're my good friend and have helped me in so many ways and so many times through my own journey, but because I also love the way you present your wisdom to the world. And I've been reading your articles and your posts for several years now, and have been really blessed to meet you in person when I moved to Vancouver Island.
Yeah.
So it's going to be lovely to be able to share some of your wisdom with the rest of the universe.
Thanks so much, Monica. It was a pleasure to finally meet you after reading your work. And I knew when I began connecting with you just online that there was a soul spark, when somebody speaks your language.
Mm.
So that was the feeling from the beginning. And so I'm so happy to continue a conversation here.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start by reading a little bit of your bio, if you don't mind.
No, I don't mind.
I always go kind of in a funny way between first person and third person when I read people's bios. So I'm just going to be myself.
Okay, beautiful. That's perfect.
Okay. Sarah Norrad has honed her skills of transformation and mindful tools to create deep growth in people's lives. Through her one-on-one private practice of coaching and counseling others, she finds her passion for being of benefit. I really love that. Being of benefit is like one of the most amazing things we can do when we arrive on the planet. You are a personal and business coach and an author, and a longtime meditator, RYT, and certified professional coach, and you support people on their journey to self and success. And you have studied energetic healing, counseling, coaching, yoga, and Buddhism, and you teach practices that support others to move forward and heal their lives by holistic means. And then later at the end, we're going to share how you can connect with Sarah through the World Wide Web and through her Facebook and Instagram and website. So, one thing I forgot to add, that you are the creatrix of the Mastering Life coaching program, which we can talk about at the end. Remind me that I give you a chance to explain what that is. Okay. And I'd like to start this interview by asking you, what does it mean to be wild and sovereign to Sarah?
Beautiful. Well, I came upon this word kind of a few years ago, I think, when it started to become more hype, the word sovereignty. And I didn't know what it meant. I thought it was this weird new kind of hype word, and I didn't know where it landed with me at that point. I saw a lot of women proclaiming their sovereignty. I was questioning what that realization would be for me. And then kind of as I've sat with the word more and more and worked with it in my own life, for me, it's the realization that we are these individual beings who have choice. And it's at this choice that we can transform our lives whenever we choose. If we have, the ability, and we know that we have the ability. So sovereignty for me was this realization of breaking the bonds of codependency and blame around other people, and coming into the realization that we have the responsibility to heal our lives, and we have the responsibility to transform them and find, careers and follow our passion and bring happiness into our world in whatever way that is every day. So sovereignty has become a stronger word in my world as I step more and more into the power of, not blaming and more taking responsibility.
I love the way that you have paired sovereignty and responsibility in the same sentence, because that really expands actually the meaning of it. quite exponentially. It is, for me, sovereignty is something that I've been working on for quite a while and that I teach through my practice. But I don't think anybody has ever yet put it together exactly the way you just have. So thank you for that. And I'm going to ponder that more after our conversation.
Beautiful.
So today, what we were going to talk about is how to suffer less and transcend our samskaras, which are habitual patterns of suffering.
Yeah.
And you are an expert in this, and I am not. So I am going to let you explain what samskaras are and what these habitual patterns are that we maybe unconsciously engage in.
Definitely. Awesome. Yeah, so I'll just kind of explain the background behind, like, samskara is a Sanskrit word. So it comes, I learned it through the yogic transit tradition. And then I connect it also to a Buddhist principle called bodhicitta. So I'm going to bring together these different kind of spiritual principles in order for us to understand how we can move past patterns of suffering. So I think we all get stuck in patterns of suffering. It's not uncommon. It's very regular, even for, high-level practitioners to do that. And these are, samskara means a carved pattern. So it's a habitual pattern that we've, through in yoga, because it's many lives is the belief. So we believe that through many lives, we've carved these patterns of suffering. So it's not just this life that we're healing from patterns, it's the many lives that we've had in the past as well. So how do we get out of, it's like a carved route, when you see on the highway those routes in the pavement and your car wants to go in them, it's the same thing. We have these patterns of suffering that we want to go in. For some reason, they're a draw, it's like this gravitational pull towards them. So part of that in yoga is finding your seat. And it's the same in mindfulness practices and in Buddhism and in energetic healing. You need to find your grounding. You need to find a witness consciousness and start being able to observe your suffering and how you cause yourself suffering and choose that suffering. So a few things that can be done with the samskaras are to watch our thoughts and our behaviors and our emotions. And we can relate that to a therapeutic process of cognitive behavioral therapy, where you watch your thoughts, how they affect your behaviors, and how your behaviors affect your emotions. So I find it really interesting to study spirituality and therapeutic practices and energetic healing and Buddhism as well, because they are all teaching very much the same principles. They've just packaged them in a different way.
I really resonate with that and love what you're saying about the patterns and how you related that to like the ruts in the road. Because I think that our mind and our ego are very good at attaching themselves to certain patterns. And then we start to believe this is who we are. So then we're in this pattern that is hard to break because we believe what it is that the mind and the ego are saying, and the patterns become intrinsic parts of our DNA.
Yes. And that's why it's important for us to be able to become a witness to our experience more and more, rather than believing we are the experience. Because say we're dealing with, depression or anxiety or just negative thinking, which, so many of us are stuck in patterns of negative thinking and being hard on ourselves because that's how we were brought up. So if we don't have this witness consciousness and this bigger perspective to step back and see ourselves, we believe that negative thinking is us. We believe that negative patterning is us. So one thing to start to look at when you're working with your patternings of suffering is to look at your thoughts and your behaviors. So to switch out of the samskaras, you have a choice. You can choose to shift your perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So change your perspective of how you see your life and your situation. You know, say it's you're really frustrated with work and you're continually suffering because you hate your job, and you can either, so you know, this is just a broad example, but you can either change your perspective of how you feel about your job, you know, find something you love in it that you can dedicate yourself passionately to and believe in, which would shift your perspective, or you change your behavior and you have to change your job. So it's shifting those two things that then shift our emotional experience of life and lead us to either suffering or happiness.
Mm.
Do you have any questions about that?
Yeah, I mean, not necessarily a question, but just an observation how we have to switch our thought patterns and our physical reality, or maybe both. Because I think that usually we're coming from a place of thinking that if we change our external circumstances, then our internal circumstances will change. But naturally, that is not really how that works. You know, we first have to change our internal circumstances, and then the external may change, or we may also choose to change the external. And then how does that relate to the tender heart of sadness in Buddhism, where we are trying to avoid our habitual patterns, like where we're trying to avoid heartache, basically? How does that fit into that?
So bodhicitta is kind of the goal for Buddhism. So you're trying to build bodhicitta and be more with that, which bodhicitta means awakened heart. We want our hearts to awaken. So we can't awaken our hearts unless we feel our experience of life.
Can you say that part again?
Yeah. we can't awaken our hearts unless we feel our experience of life. So we're always trying to avoid our big feelings, which is often what our samskaras come from, is an avoidance of our experience of life, of being human. Being human is not easy. It's hard. So in Buddhism, why the goal is to awaken our hearts, and why that actually creates huge bravery in us, because we're actually meeting our lives. We're actually meeting ourselves. We're meeting each other. We're meeting disappointment possibly and heartache, but we're also meeting this huge bravery and tenderness. So we need to embrace all of ourselves, our wholeness, which bodhicitta is that. It's a Buddhist principle to awaken your heart so that you can embrace the wholeness of your life, which is another way to change our habitual patterning of running away from ourselves and our experience of life.
Okay, so if I have that straight, and I please encourage you to write an article about this, because I feel like I need to have it tactile in print in my hands, you know, to be able to go over it and understand it better. So what you're saying is, as we awaken our heart and we meet ourselves in the hard places, in the sadness, in the things that have broken down, in the decomposition of our lives, that then we are able to change the samskaras, the habitual patterns that we have, and the way that we view ourselves and view our existence. Is that?
Yes. And I know it's kind of heady, Buddhist philosophy and yogic philosophy, but it's very simple. If you can bring it down to the fact of we stop running away from life. That is, if you go to the kernel and the seed of it, it is to stop running away and to be with oneself. So when we're stuck in our samskaras, these habitual patterns of suffering, they are usually because we're trying to avoid something. So, if addiction is one of our samskaras, it's usually because we're trying to avoid some big feelings that we're having. whatever that be because of. So if we can be with that and be with that big experience more and stay, learn the courage to stay, those patterns shift, which is where mindfulness practice comes in.
Okay, I'm going to read something you wrote, and then I'm going to say something from my own experience about that. So you wrote, we have a pattern of trying to avoid our sadness and feelings, so we distract and run. However, at the center of us all is a tender-hearted and beautiful longing. We mistake it for something bad, so we turn away from our depth and ourselves. And then, like, society encourages us to be in happiness all the time, so it's like something that's been ingrained in us. You've also said, true strengths come from shifting our patterns, observing them, and being able to pause long enough to make a different decision, one that will bring us to a better outcome and a place of truer happiness.
Yeah.
So from my experience, and thank you for that.
Yeah.
From my experience, the other day, I tried to go into a very deeply painful memory, and I was doing it in tandem with my partner. He was witnessing that I was going to witness this memory, this painful memory. Mm-hmm. And so why did I want to do that? Why did I want to bring pain upon myself? Mm-hmm. I wanted to get through that memory to the other side, where I could see how my thinking about that event has been affecting the way I show up in the world. So I told him the memory. I saw his reactions to my memory, because it wasn't something pleasant. It was something from my childhood. I could see how it was affecting his heart. And so I couldn't share it without weeping, which is because I was feeling deep compassion for my inner child who had experienced that. And so then I sat in that feeling, which was really painful. And then I waited, and I didn't distract myself with talking to him about it or whatever. I just sat, with that emotion. And later, when I was through to the other side, I could see that I had already developed patterns of thought around that memory. And I'm not even sure anymore if all of them are true. Like, I'm not even sure if I remember it 100% correctly or, but I have definitely made choices in my life based on that memory and how I experienced it. So now, because I stayed in that painful moment, I'm able to make new patterns in my life.
Yeah. Yeah. And and thank you for sharing that beautiful story. What stands out for me from that is that you were able to build compassion towards your experience and not turn away from it, like claim that it was okay and that you're there for yourself, even at a really hard point or through a really hard memory. And, that is a big shift in our consciousness. When we can choose to be, the loving parent to ourselves and say, no, I'm there for you. I'm with you right now, and I love you. And I think that's one of the samskaras that we can shift to, is our internal dialogue. Like you're saying, the stories that we tell ourselves. How can we tell ourselves a better story?
So speaking of that, what can you share with us what your journey has been through? I mean, I know you to be a sensitive person, a person who really experiences life on a deep level. So I'm curious about hearing more of your story, how you traversed as a sensitive person through life and your own samskaras.
Definitely. Yeah. Well, I came to spirituality very, very young. And that was a big savior for myself. This realization that there was something more that I needed to connect to, a higher place of power without and within, in order to navigate life as a highly sensitive person. And, when I was young, I started having physical symptoms. Really bad stomach aches and headaches and other things that actually took me out of school for quite a bit of the time. And we couldn't figure out what it was. And then finally, you know, the doctor just said, well, she's just stressed. It's stress.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that happens for highly sensitive people, is we're taking in so much information all the time on many different levels. You know, we're sensing other people, we're trying to take care of situations, we're just receiving so much stimulus that and we have a high reactivity, which makes highly sensitive people really good artists and really good healers and really good intuitive workers. And it also makes us, you know, kind of vulnerable if we don't have practices in place to ground and protect ourselves and come back to who we are. So I started studying Buddhism when I was very young. And I think that was a practice that taught me how to begin to build the courage to stay with my feelings.
Mm.
And I didn't know why I had such strong feelings. I was overwhelmed by, you know, negative thoughts and emotions, and I didn't know why. I didn't know what those were. And so at first, you know, I didn't deal with it that well. I developed an eating disorder when I was 12 that lasted until my mid-20s. So we developed these methods to cope with our sensitivities and our experience of life, until I believe we are able to learn new tools that we can bring into place.
Mm.
Yeah.
Wow. So thank you so much. I witnessed you in your story and your experience, and I learned some new things about you that I didn't know. And it really does hugely expand my compassion for the life path that you've been on. And value your wisdom so much more, even because you have come through so much and I know you've only shared a snippet of, you know, what your life has been. And so we come to our wisdom through facing our shadows. So I know you're really good at grounding practices and different practices that help us, self-care practices. So can you share, you know, some of the practices and the tools that you use for being able to be more in touch with ourselves?
Yeah, well, I have a daily practice that's transformed throughout the years. I've had it for as long as I can remember. And it used to be, you know, it's gone from being based in mostly meditation to being based mostly in doing yoga to being kind of more an energetic manifesting practice. So it's changed and morphed all the time. But the thing that I do find is important is to begin the day connected to myself. And connected to, you know, the grounding and the earth and my breath. So a simple practice for that, you know, is to just take 5 to 15 minutes and sit with yourself, watch your breath, you know, be with your experience of life in your body. Because we're avoiding those so often just in our daily lives because we get so busy too. That coming back to, you know, that experience of being with ourselves and our breath for a few minutes every morning really sets the day. So I would recommend a daily practice to people who are feeling highly sensitive or needing more support in their lives. Because we can't keep looking outside of ourselves for the grounding and the validation. We need to start building inner validation within. And a daily practice is really good for that.
That's awesome. And also I know, because I watch how you move through life, and I see that you're constantly taking yourself on these little dates with yourself. Like, I mean, sometimes you go with others.
Yes.
Or your beloved, but a lot of times you're out there on your own, and I really admire that. So maybe you can talk a little bit about what it is that you do when you do take yourself on these little dates.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'd love to talk about that. So self-dates I believe, are extremely important. And, you know, we can have wonderful people in our lives and our beloveds, and we can have our work. And we need to carve out time for our own inspiration, I believe, in order to connect with ourselves and connect with the universe at large. And in order to process our experience of life. We can't process our experience of life if we're constantly doing or surrounded by people. So I take myself on little dates, and I commit to myself for that time period to be with my precious self. And often I'll connect with my inner child and I'll ask her what she wants. So, anybody who follows me at all will know I love going to the beach and out to the forest. And I also really love going and sitting at a restaurant by myself. One of the things that was very formative to me was traveling in my late teens and early 20s. I lived abroad for a lot of years, and I lived in countries often where I didn't speak the language very well. And what I loved about that was I would go out and I would just sit and observe. And I wouldn't even be able to understand often what people were saying, but I would just get to take in their experience of life, their energy, the way people move, the way people interact. And I got to feel how that affected me. So I think, a self date can be a simple thing, or it can be, more extravagant and you go out for a meal. But whatever it is, I encourage that practice of self-care. Because we need to learn how to become our own beloved. And that can't happen through somebody else.
Yay, I love that. Becoming our own beloved. I really believe in that. Yeah. And this is not the first time that I've interviewed somebody who has said that their commitment to traveling and expanding their consciousness of what the world is about was really grounding. And what you said about if you're in a new place by yourself, you're feeling vulnerable, you don't maybe know the language, but you become a good observer, which is a great practice to bring back home after your travels, to become an observer of yourself. Yeah. So that's one of the things that I'm learning from you. I love to be by myself on my own, but one thing that I haven't practiced is going to a restaurant and being by myself in a restaurant, because I feel weird. I feel weird most days anyway. Just being myself, but doing it in public is like, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
But I'm learning that from you. I really admire that about you, and I admire how you find, like, you fill the space, like you take up all the space that you need to do in a day. And I think a lot of us are afraid of taking up space or being our whole selves in the world. Yes. So the last thing I'd like to speak to you about is how you feel midlife crisis is an opportunity. And to wake up and to face our sovereignty. So if you could speak on that piece, I would really appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, I think, midlife and also any crisis in our life is an opportunity. And I know it's hard to see that at times. I've been through some big crises in my life, and, they can be really, really dark and really, really scary. And you can't see out of it when you're in the darkness. That is the quality of darkness, is building the trust that you're going to be okay, even though you can't see how. And I think in the opportunity of, a crisis is that gift of building up our faith and our trust in ourselves, that we will find a way. If we keep staying and keep doing our own work, we will transcend to a better place with less suffering. And that can be done in so many different ways. There's not one life path. There's thousands and thousands and thousands. And becoming a happier, and more alive person, and more aligned and living more in our bliss means something different to everyone. So I think, the midlife crisis is this great wake-up call you know, possibly the call of, I've been living my tune to somebody else's drum, and I don't want to do that anymore. You know, I was told that this would equal happiness, and that's bullshit, and it doesn't. So I need to figure out what that is for me. And it's that opportunity when we break. When we break, when we fall apart, when we're in the darkness, it's an opportunity to recreate our experience of life and who we identify as. And I think we all need that many times in this life. So I think, you know, when we're going through something that's called a crisis, we can look at it as an opportunity for great growth and new transformation. And that on the other side, you know, we can count on a better experience of life because we've grown through that experience of crisis.
Thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
It really speaks to me. And there is a very particular planetary transit that happens for us around the age of 42, which now is escaping my brain, but I will come up with it at some point. But as you say, there are many crises in our life where we have that opportunity to break open, like the seed that is breaking the husk and is just, you know, coming out and seeing what opportunities are there, you know, as it begins to grow. So, and that brings me to wanting to ask you about your program, Mastering Life. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, totally. It's a program that I developed. It's a 2-month coaching program with me, where you learn transformational tools and powerful practices to become more aligned with self and more aligned with our own power. So I started this last summer. I launched it, and it went way beyond what I thought it would, which was awesome. And I had lots of people join and have a great experience with it, where they realized that they could move through something that they didn't think they could. And they could transcend to a new perspective, place of hope, and achieve what they thought they couldn't before. So this program is a great opportunity to work with whatever experience you're in right now, knowing that you want some change in your life. And I'm just developing a deep dive in this program now, which is going to be coming out about mid-January.
Okay.
So I'll start doing some promo stuff for it, and you know, there'll be information on my website, and you can join my newsletter to find out more info. And it's a deep dive into mastering life, and this one's going to be a 3-month program with once a week coaching and videos as well, and modules. So it's a very supportive process for people to transform and transcend that suffering that we were talking about before. Opportunity to shift and grow.
I love, love, love that. It feels empowering. It feels supportive. It feels safe. And I mean, I know from just our one-on-one meetings where we help each other through our own, you know, each other's journey, which I so appreciate, how calming and supportive your presence is. So I'm excited to see what this develops into. And often when we start out offering something or being of service in the world, we think we know what it's going to be, and then it becomes, you know, it has its own life and becomes whatever it wants to be, you know, whatever the world needs most. So I support you on your journey with this, and I encourage others to explore what it is that you have to offer. And so very much want to thank you for sharing your time today, which is valuable, and your essence, which I really adore. And I'm sure that we will have other conversations. And thank you for showing up today.
Thank you, Monica. It's my pleasure to be here, and I honor your powerful journey and offerings too. And I feel blessed to be a part of this sharing of, you know, women who lead in the world, and through this transformation and growth that we can support each other and ourselves in. So thank you.
Thank you. And Sarah can be reached at sarahnorrad.com. Yes, correct?
Yes. Yes.
And I can be reached at monicacarless.com. Easy peasy. So great love to all of you, and I will see you again on our next conversation with the universe.